All right, so like I said, help yourself. There's coffee and food up here. I'm going to go through a quick intro of what Code and Coffee is, and then we're going to have a presentation. I'm going to do one first on vibe coding, just information on what are vibe coding tools, some best practices and stuff, and then we'll get into the actual workshop. Code and Coffee, we're going to talk about what this organization is. I want to do a round of intros, so we'll just go around real quick, and everybody can say what you're working on, what you're here to learn. And then I've got this presentation on vibe coding before the actual workshop. And that's, like I said, security concerns, some basic tips and tricks. And then we'll get to the workshop itself. So this is going to cover using either Claude Code or Gemini. Gemini's free. I've used Claude Code a lot more. I'm more familiar with it, but it is a paid one. So I want to cover or support both use cases, whichever one you want to use. And we're going to build a simple web app by just chatting with the AI and test everything and run it locally right there on your laptop. We will be using the internet to connect to the AI, but the website's going to be local right there on your laptop. We'll test it out, and when everything's working, we'll connect it to Git, push the changes to GitHub, and then connect that to either Vercel, Netlify, Cloudflare Pages, whatever you want to use to deploy it. So basically, once that's set up, you can just chat with the AI. When you see something, when you get it to a place that you like, you can just tell it to commit the changes and push it to GitHub, and then that'll update the site. So we're going to use a normal developer workflow. It's called a CI/CD, continuous development, continuous improvement, or deployment. And we want to get those pieces set up, and then you can just chat and vibe code and push your website for free you'll be hosting it on Netlify, Vercel, or Cloudflare, using GitHub to back it up and for version control. And if you want to use Gemini, that one's free as well. So everything about this you'll be able to do using free services and just vibe code an app and push it to production. So quick intro on the group. What we're meeting here today, this local meetup, it's Code and Coffee. So we have the QR code here is for our local group, just the Tallahassee meetup. But we're a chapter of a much larger organization. There's 50,000 developers, and we are the 40th chapter, the newest one. They provide support for local tech meetups like ours, and they're more focused on networking events, workshops like we're doing today, mentorship and job search stuff, so more career focused. And then if you're interested, there are two other groups where they're more social. There's still tech. One's Tally Devs, that's just any type of programming. And then there's Global AI, specific to AI. We have two others. I've got some other links here that will help you join those in a minute. And then the main website is codeandcoffee.org. That's the parent organization if you're interested. Okay, so that's our meetup here, and we meet monthly-ish on Saturdays. Because we're so close to the stadium, if there's a game, we're going to skip that weekend. So, anybody else need a QR code? Got it? Okay. And we're open to doing other formats. So, these are picking up. This is the biggest crowd we've had so far. But if there's a better time, if we want to try to do one during the week, we could meet up, even doing something during the workday for lunch or whatever. So just let me know if anyone's interested in other formats or, if this is the most convenient location or time or whatever, because we're just getting these started and want to grow it. All right. So I'm the chapter lead. My name's Joseph, and I am the head of developer relations for AppSmith, which is a low-code platform to connect to any API or database. It gives you a low-code drag and drop UI to build the interface, and then from there you can connect to data sources, transform the data if you need to move it between sources. It's very developer focused, but also it's low code for the front end. So you don't have to write any code to build the website, but then there's plenty of code for the data side. And then I am a freelance consultant, and I started GreenFlux right here in Domi Station. It was one of these two offices, I can't remember for sure, but that was back in 2016. And I freelanced for several years and then found AppSmith, and I've been working there for about 4 years now. Also co-organizer for Global AI Tallahassee and Tally Devs. Both of those meet up at Momo's on Pensacola, not too far from here. And we meet Wednesdays. It's first Wednesday for Global AI and third Wednesday for Tally Devs. So I think it'd be cool if we can go around and do a round of intros. And instead of saying like where you work or school or whatever, I'd like to hear what everybody's currently building or learning, whether that is work or school or hobby or whatever it is. What are you interested in? What are you learning and building? So we can go around this way.
Hi, my name is Akash.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for coming out. I heard a lot of cool different tech that everybody's using, and a lot of it that I've used myself. So I'm familiar with hopscotch. It used to be called Postwoman, right? From Postman, and then when it first came out.
I'm not sure. I came across it a month ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I was learning.
And then you mentioned N8N. I've used that quite a bit, and I know Max, who's one of their founders, and now he's like moved to marketing or DevRel, I think. OpenCV, you mentioned. Yeah, I've been messing around with that a little bit too. And Olama. Neil, you're the one that mentioned something I actually am not familiar with, so I'll be coming to your workshop in January, so you can teach me about that.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Cool. Well, all right, let's get into the topics for today then. First, we're going to do, before that, there's a Discord server for all three groups. So Code and Coffee, our group, and then Tally Devs and Global AI. We wanted to combine it all, so there's a general channel that's for everyone, and then there's individual channels for each one of the groups, but it's all one server. So instead of having 3 different meetup groups to monitor, you can just follow this one.
And that's for the Tally Devs
Yeah.
region. All right.
Yep, Tally Devs is kind of leading it up. You know, we're the one that's not a chapter of something else, but it's also the biggest group locally and the one that's been around the longest. So yeah, Tally Devs is kind of the one leading the other two and organizing everything. Everybody got it? All right. Okay, so let's get into the presentation first. This is Vibe Check. It's an intro to vibe coding tools, some security considerations and tips and tricks. So what is vibe coding? Most of you have heard of it, right? It's you writing great code with a little help from ChatGPT and Claude, right? Like if you do it right, you can write some really great code, but then there's the definition where you don't really look at it at all, you just let it do everything. That term actually came from Andre Karpathy, I think is how you say it. And this was back in 2023. He tweeted that the hottest new programming language is English, and it got 8 million views and almost 8,000 retweets. And then he's a researcher at OpenAI and before that Tesla. And then in 2025, he actually coined the term. So he said there's a new kind of coding I call vibe coding, where you fully give into the vibes, embrace exponentials, and forget that the code even exists. And this has taken it to the extreme where you just don't pay attention, you don't read anything, and you're just like, next, allow, and you can do that for fun if you're in a sandbox, if you didn't put in your API key, there's certain times you can do that safely. But that's where the term comes from, and it's a bit more about just letting the AI do all the work and you just chat, So there are different types of vibe coding tools, and before we get into using one today, I just want to talk about the different types. So there's the chat-driven text-to-code generation, and these tend to be the website, the resulting app or website is hosted by the provider. The same tool that you're chatting with the AI, that's the tool that's hosting the website. And so you basically chat, and now there's a website hosted, and you don't have to think about it. They usually have an option to download the code and host it yourself, but that's like afterwards, after you've built it through their tool. And some examples are Lovable, Bolt, V0, and Replit. And then the next kind of category are AI CLIs, command line interface, like Cloud Code and Gemini that we'll be using today. And then there are AI IDEs, which a lot of times are just a normal IDE that's connected to the AI CLI. Or it could be a plugin in VS Code or something. So there's a few IDEs that were actually built from the ground up to be AI built, but most of them are just a normal IDE, and then they have a terminal, like but even before AI, the IDEs had a terminal, right? And now you're just accessing that AI in the terminal through an IDE. So I'm kind of grouping several different together there. There's the pure ones, and there's the ones that are tacked on to an IDE. So some examples are GitHub Copilot, Claude Code, Gemini, and then VS Code with any of the add-ons. And then the last is automation builders. So here is where you don't have an actual website or app, you just want automations to happen in the background. If a new Google form gets submitted, I want this email to get sent or whatever it is, right? And so you don't need an app or a website open for those things to happen. You use a website to build it, you have an interface while you're building, but then once it's built, it just runs in the cloud. And so that's the last kind of category there. And again, I'm grouping a lot of these together. You could definitely break it down more granularly. But with these, they don't have a UI and they just run in the cloud. And then some examples are ChatGPT apps, not just the regular chat, but they have this new apps feature where you authorize like Google Docs or Gmail or Stripe, whatever you want to connect. And then in your chat, it will build an automation, not just a one-time action that happened in that chat, but like an app that you can reuse, right? Same with N8N. They've added a chat recently. And then there's an open source version that's kind of like N8N called PipeDream. And they just launched a new thing called string.com, which is, it's a separate tool, but it's actually using PipeDream under the hood to just chat and build the old workflows that you used to have to drag and drop together. And now the chat does it for you. But then if you want to go edit it, it's really just building the old version in PipeDream. So it's kind of cool, like adding an AI chat to it, but then you can still edit it manually with a drag and drop editor. Okay, so there are plenty of awesome things about vibe coding. We've all heard of people that were able to, anybody can build an app that had no programming experience. You've heard of no coders launching a startup. Some devs that are building things in hours that would normally take them weeks or months. And there's, a few solo founders that have made like 10,000 a month. That's like recurring revenue, not a single sale, but like steady income from subscriptions or whatever. And there was a kid that built a game. They got like 1 million users, with no coding experience at all. So plenty of awesome, things that can come out of vibe coding. But then there's a lot to watch out for too, the bad vibes. And I like to say that the S in vibe stands for security, because there is none. It's going to let you do some really bad things that a dev would never do, right? So you have to stay on top of it and watch out for this stuff. If there's any API key involved, make sure you're putting that into an environment variable instead of in plain text. And customer data, consider like, are you putting other people's personal info in there, payment info, things like that. There are compliance and legal violations that you have to worry about. And then there's shadow IT. Has anybody heard that term? That's when employees at a company start deciding to use their own tools because you don't provide the right stuff to solve their problems, right? And then they're going to just go pick any AI tool and copy and paste sensitive company info in there, your customers' data, and then that's getting put into some third-party chat, AI that your company does not approve, does not have visibility into, So there's lots of things that can go wrong with this stuff, but also a lot of good benefits. Some examples. This is one user using Gemini. His API key was leaked, and he lost $300, which honestly, that's not much at all. He caught it in 2 days. It could have been way worse. If that would have been like a AWS server account or something, it probably would have been 10,000 that he lost. And then there was a dev that made this, it wasn't a dating app, it was like an app to review guys from dating sites. And it was vibe coded and not done securely, and a bunch of stuff leaked. They didn't even have to hack it. It was just there under the hood, like not encrypted, not exposed, not really even a hack, just completely unsecure data, right? And they lost 72,000 images, which included selfies and state IDs. So you don't want to be the one legally responsible for this stuff. Think about the personal info that you're putting in there. And so here's some general tips for all AI coding tools before we get into the CLI stuff. You want to research and brainstorm in a separate AI chat first. So I have my preferred coding tools for actually writing code, which is Claude Code. But before I even start in Claude Code, I'm going to go have a chat with Claude, the website, because it's a little more ergonomic to like upload some files and connect other data sources and whatnot. Or I'll use ChatGPT or Gemini if I need a larger context window. But basically, one way or another, I'm having a chat to determine the tech stack that I want to use and create a plan. So I basically know what I want to build, but I don't know exactly what library I want to use or what database or whatever, right? And instead of having that discussion in your coding tool, you should have it in a completely different tool, different chat, because otherwise you're going to pollute the context. You're trying to build something, and at some point you're going to decide, okay, here's exactly what I'm using. But if you're in the same chat where you talked about 10 other tools that you're not even going to use, that pollutes the context, and then the AI can get confused and it might start throwing in things you didn't want. So come up with a plan in a different AI tool first, finalize that plan, okay, and then you're going to set some constraints in your prompt. So you can have the chat in another AI tool, and then when you think you've got things the way you want, tell it that, okay, I want to take this and go put it in another tool. Give me a summary of everything that we've discussed and the things that we ruled out and whatever. And you set some constraints and figure out if you're building a proof of concept or an MVP. Are you just testing out an idea? Or is it something that needs to be production ready and have type safety? So put these things in your prompt, especially when it's the POC or a quick test, because it's going to try to do things for scale and debugging and all these extra things that you don't need. So if it really is just a quick, easy test, tell it that. If it's for production and it needs to be bulletproof, then tell it that as well. And then when you've got all this stuff figured out, when you have your full list of what you want to build, break it into smaller tasks. So you don't want to put in this massive prompt and say, here, go build it all. But you do want to tell it everything that you're trying to build, give it the end goal, and then break it into tasks and say, okay, here's everything I want to build, but now let's do phase one. Because if you only give it phase one, it may make some assumptions because it doesn't know what phase 2, 3, 4 is, right? But then if you try to do everything at once, you're going to fill up your context window before you can finish, and then it starts hallucinating, and you got to compact it and start over. And so I think you need to do both. Tell it everything, but then also break it into chunks, and don't let it do everything at once. And then you can create and maintain a checklist. So this is how you manage doing both. Right? It needs to know everything, but at the same time, not be trying to do everything at once. So you can tell it to make a checklist, especially with Claude Code and Gemini, the ones that are working on your local file system. You can say, okay, here's everything I want to build, break it into phases, create a checklist file, and now let's start building phase one. And at some point in there, it's going to have its context filled up and you need to clear it out and restart. But you'll have a checklist that it can go back and see where it left off. So you're not really losing everything, right? You're keeping the important stuff. And if you get stuck, ask another LLM. So if you've been going through a loop on Claude Code for like 5 different times and it's still not fixing the error, and then you paste in the console log from the terminal to help debug it, and it's like, oh, I found the issue, it's this. And then it tries to fix it, and it's still broke. And wait, I found it. It'll tell you it's sure it fixed it this time, right? So if you get stuck 2 or 3 times in a row, copy your message history into another AI and ask it. And a lot of times, this is one where sometimes I don't even read it. I'll just paste the whole history into the next tool. It spits something out. I won't even read it. I'll copy and paste that back into the first one. I'm like, does this help? Paste. And just let it think about this new info, right? And a lot of times that's all it needs. And then on the opposite extreme, it's really good to review every line of code and ask questions. On a big project, that's really hard to do, but if you want to learn, if you don't want it to just build it and get something done for the sake of having the finished tool, if you actually want to learn, read every one of those steps at least. Maybe not every line of code, but in each step, read what it's producing and ask questions. You could be asking questions for your own sake just to learn that you like the approach, but I want to understand it. Or you can actually question it, okay? Don't assume that it's got the perfect solution every time. Maybe you didn't explain the problem that well. and it's doing something that's not actually helpful, right? So question its approach. Say, is this really the best situation, the best approach for this situation or whatever? And don't just take whatever it suggests every time and go straight to coding. So question it, whether it's for your own learning or to literally question its methodology. And again, plan in between each edit. I usually do 2 or 3 rounds of planning in between every single edit. I would suggest doing at least one, but you don't want to just let it code and then give it a prompt and go straight back to code. You give it a prompt and then discuss that idea a little bit and then decide on that approach and then start coding. Okay, so these are some tips specific to Claude Code CLI. Gemini is going to have some similar stuff. Yeah?
Are you familiar with GitHub's spec kit?
I've heard of it. I haven't used it.
Okay, I'll let you do your presentation. We can discuss it.
Okay, cool. So these are specific to Gemini CLI, but if you're using, Claude Code, but if you're using Gemini, they should work. Yeah.
Just a note on the vibe management. When you're choosing your stack, I strongly recommend you pick a programming language you're comfortable learning at least, even if you don't want to be digging into every line of code.
Right.
You're going to have to probably at some point get into the code. So
Yes.
Yeah.
picking something you're comfortable with, or at least are open to learning, is pretty.
Right. I'm doing that right now with Astro. So I wanted to redo a few sites and have it markdown content driven, and Astro is really good for that. And like, I don't have enough time that I'm really committed to learning an entire framework right now, but I do want to build things consistently in the same one that I can glance at and start to learn a little bit and understand it, right? So I spent a lot of time picking which one I wanted to use, even though I'm not going to sit down and try to learn the entire language. But I want to pick one that when I do have to look at the code, right? Like it's the right one for me, that it's a good solution for that type of project. So I don't know if I'll ever fully learn Astro and be able to write it on my own, but I did take some time to pick that one, right? Because that's the one I'll be debugging at least. So I totally agree.
Astro's fun. It's easy.
Yeah. Okay, so first thing is learn the slash commands. There are a ton. There's similar ones, some exact ones in Gemini and Claude Code, but I'm not going to go through all of them. The big important ones are slash init. You should run this first in any project, whether you're starting from scratch and it's an empty folder or you're building on top of an existing repo or whatever it is. This creates a Claude MD file, and there won't be much in it if you're starting an empty project, but on an existing one, it'll scan the whole repo and put a summary in there, and then as you're building, you can update that and give it more directions. You can switch models. This will really help on saving costs, especially if you're using Claude Code and you want to use Opus, like the more powerful model for writing code, but you can switch back to Sonnet or Haiku for just chatting and talking about an idea. And there's even a mixed model mode where as you switch between coding and plan mode, it will switch models for you. So that can definitely save on some costs there. So again, I'm not going to go through all, but the Claude MD file that it creates when you run init, so there's a lot to this, and it really helps to understand how it works and where it lives and how to apply it best. So it adds context to every prompt, and you can use that init command to create one automatically, or you can manually write your own. I would suggest let it starting it automatically and then editing it from there. And you can have one per folder and even in subfolders of a project. So at the top level of your project, you got one Claude MD file, and then in a subfolder, you might have one that's specific to just that directory because it helps to keep these kind of short. You don't want a massive one. And you can also have one at your user level. So that applies to all of your projects, and now it's more about your preferences and coding style as opposed to that one specific project. And these are used to add specific instructions, programming conventions, and they're also really useful when like the training data of the model is outdated and it tends to get something wrong. So if you keep running into an issue and like every time you ask ChatGPT or whatever model it is and it gets this thing wrong, and then you're like, no, it's the new version does it this way, or in this latest version they switched the default export or the name of a variable, whatever it is, you'll correct it And then the next time you have a different chat with it, it'll get it wrong again because the training data hasn't been updated, right? So you can add this stuff to your CloudMD file and fix it in that one project. You can add it to your user level and it'll remember it for all projects. And you can quickly add something just by starting your prompt with a pound sign. So instead of having to go find that file for the one project or the subfolder or for your user level one, you don't even have to go touch the file. You can just tell the chat, start it with a pound sign and say always do whatever. And then it will ask you, do you want to save it at the user level or the project level? And it'll remember it. So those get added to every prompt, and it will look for your user one every time, and then the folder ones for that prompt, for that folder, wherever you're at. All right, a few other tips. Like I said, always start with plan mode, and you can shift tab to switch back and forth. So it will show in Gemini and in Claude Code, it'll say that you're in plan mode or you're in auto mode, where it decides which one, or you can be in like just the pure chat mode. And then I usually do 2 to 3 rounds of planning every time between edits. Here's a cool tip. You can grab a screenshot and drag it into the chat of the terminal. And it just adds the file path. So it's like you're dragging an entire file, an image, a JSON file, whatever it is. It'll put the path of it into your chat, and then you just type the rest of your question along with that file address. And if it has permission already, it'll just read it and see the file and then include that with the answer. If it doesn't have permission, it'll ask. So you can drag in a folder or a file from anywhere, and it will be able to add that as extra context. And then another cool thing to try, if you're familiar with VS Code or JetBrains or whatever IDE, and you already use the terminal in that tool, then try starting Claude Code or Gemini inside of there instead of just a standalone terminal. Another cool thing to try, find a sample repo, something that you would like to build on top of. It could be like a website for your portfolio or CRM or just any little project that you'd like to build on top of. So copy that repo to your local, and then you can vibe code on top of it and add some new features. Like maybe there's an app you use regularly that's missing some feature that bugs you. If it's open source, download it and see if you can build it yourself. And then, let's see. Oh, and here's another thing I like to do is iterate on an idea in the web chat before I move it to local. And then in Claude Code, there's an option where you can just click a button and it'll take the context of your web chat and transfer and get you started in the CLI. So you can do it that way, or you can use the resume is another one, and that'll let you pull up a previous conversation and you can bounce back and forth between web and the terminal. And another debugging tip here, if it's not figuring out what's going on, right-click the browser and go to Inspect, and then the console tab, just copy and paste the errors or take a screenshot of the errors and put that into the prompt. And I'll usually look to see what type of error it is, if it's like something obvious and I can tell it why we're getting this one. But a lot of times just copy and paste the error with nothing else in your prompt, and that'll be enough that it understands it and can fix whatever error it is. All right, so onto the workshop. I have some notes that's gonna help everyone, save you a ton of typing. If you wanna go to techtlh.org and then click events, and you'll see today's event, and there's a link for the resources. That'll take you to a Notion page. So you'll go here to events, and then this view resource. And this is everything that we're about to do. There's a section for Mac and Windows. So you can click that little drop down to expand it and hide the Windows one or Mac one, whatever you don't need there. But I'm going to walk through what we're about to do before we actually do it here. So let's see, GitHub prerequisites. Does everybody have a GitHub account? Has everyone in here already created a GitHub account? Okay. Oh, yes, it's techtlh.org. Okay. Yep. So prerequisites, you should all have a GitHub account. Preferably already have an Anthropic or Google Gemini. If you haven't used Gemini before, but you have a Google account, it will just take a minute. And then it will help if you have a text editor installed, and if you're familiar with one, if you have one that you want to use, like Sublime Text is a great one that they have for Windows, Mac, and Linux, VS Code. You can just use like the Windows Notepad or the text editor on Mac, but it doesn't have like the code syntax highlighting and formatting. And honestly, we might not even need that today. If you want to just chat with the AI and not even touch the code, you can do that. But at some point, when you do want to start editing the code locally, it'll help to have a text editor. And then a website idea. So does everybody have an idea in mind of what you want to build? You can do anything, but today the goal is to get it all connected, to get something deployed to the web, and then you can go back and chat with it and add more features later. So start with something simple, and then you can build on top of that and add more once we have that full pipeline set up to push it to GitHub. All right, so I'm going to talk about the general steps here, looking at what do we have more of? 1, 2, 3, I see about half, maybe over half Macs. Yeah, I'm going to walk through the Mac install real quick first, and then I'm just going to let people follow along, and I'm going to bounce around and help where anybody's stuck. But before we actually start it, I just kind of want to talk through the steps. So for Mac and for Windows to install either Gemini or Claude Code, it requires Node and NPM, which are things that you're going to use not just for the AI coding stuff, but for the website that it builds. It's going to need a server to run it. And so Node is a JavaScript backend server, and NPM is a package manager that's going to help install some stuff. So for both Windows and Mac, we're going to go through and install those requirements first. And then to push the code to GitHub, there's 2 extra things we need. There's Git, which is a general tool for all Git-based systems, whether that's GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. Azure's got something, I think. There's a bunch of others. But basically, there's the Git protocol, which is to, for version control and to back up, create branches and whatnot. And then there's GitHub, the service, and their API and website, which is the specific version of Git we're going to use. So we got to install both of those. Okay? On Windows, there's one extra permission thing that we got to do after those 4 things are installed. And then we can actually install Claude Code or Gemini. After all that setup's done, the stuff that we're going to do from there is really easy and like very little coding at all. This is really more about setting up a bunch of dependencies before we can get there. But once we got everything set up, you're going to create an empty folder, open it up in the terminal, and then either type Claude or Gemini, whichever one you installed, to start it up. And then from there, you can just start chatting with it and say, I want to build a website that does this. And it will create those files right there on your computer. We'll test it out locally, and then we'll tell it, okay, we're ready to push it to GitHub. And there are terminal commands. Usually you would do that by typing like commit, a commit message, and then git push and whatnot. We're going to skip all that. We just want to install Git in GitHub, and then we're going to let the AI do it in the terminal. So you'll see the commands, and you can start to learn it that way, but you don't have to learn all the commands just to do it, right? We're going to install everything and then let the AI terminal, whether it's Claude or Gemini, just do all the commands. So grab whatever section, the Windows or Mac, and go as far as you're comfortable. If you get stuck, raise your hand or give me a holler, and I'm just going to kind of go around and check. And then I want to try to get everybody to the point where everyone has the prereqs installed. And then we'll kind of reset, realign or whatever, and then start the next round of actually doing the vibe coding. So.